Hello, you. You're listening to Globetrotter, the pod that puts the lover in travel lover. I'm your host, Cassy Martinez, and each week I trade tales with a slew of amazing adventurers who, like me, kiss and tell. I dreamt up Globetrotter while stuck at home, honestly, just to feel something. I wanted to create a pod that brought together travel fiends and friends from all over the world to trade stories and talk about the magic that is falling in love far, far away from home. And you know what we discovered? That talking about our sweet exes in Italy and crazy nights out in Berlin over Zoom made us feel just a little bit better, considering, well, everything. And speaking of travel friends from all over the world, I'm so excited for you guys to meet Jackson. The two of us met in Lisbon, burnt out on our bunk beds at a sticky little party hostel with a sexual innuendo in the name. You know the kind. Like so many cuties you meet on the road, we spoke for, 10 minutes before each of us headed on our own way. But not before that critical follow for follow on IG. A true backpacker, pre-COVID Jackson could be found surfing on a beach in Central America somewhere. So trust me, the guy's got good stories. Settle in with us, won't you? And get a glimpse into Jackson's unique traveler's mindset. And hear our cheeky little story of meeting up months later, again, in London. Alrighty, so here we are on Globetrotter, the pod that puts the lover in travel lover. We're here a little bit early today so we can have our special guest, Jackson, coming in from the UK. Hey Jackson, how are you?
I'm good, Cassie, and thank you for switching up the time for me. It's very nice of you.
Oh, totally. I can meet in the middle. It feels so weird, though. I'm in broad daylight in one of my club tops, because you know that's how we got to do it on Globetrotter. But here we are. The truth is in the daylight. Today, we are talking about travel love. And you guys, I'm so excited for Jackson to be on the show because he is a legitimate ex-travel crush of mine. And I had this idea when I started the pod. I was like, okay, every couple of episodes, like say if we hit a viewer goal or a certain amount of subscribers, whatever, I'll reach out to an ex-traveltrist and I'll ask them, oh, would they like to be on the show? And I thought it was going to be a very big, huge moment of vulnerability that I was going to have to do. Well, Jackson just kind of jumped into my DMs actually and was like, okay, I saw what you're doing with Globetrotter. I want to be on this show immediately.
I had to.
What did you think when you saw Globetrotter? Like, what was going through your mind that you were like, I have to slip into her DMs?
I mean, first of all, I was just like, damn, Cassie's missing the road big time. And so am I. But I was also just like, it sounds like such a good idea, you know? Like, I think a big part of traveling a lot of the time is the lovers that you come across. And it's just an amazing idea. Wanted to be part of it.
Amazing. Yeah, I totally agree. One, it's super obvious that I am fiending to get back on the road. But also, I really love that we can hop on this kind of call and just normalize these conversations. You know, like I was chatting with Nasir, our first guest, about, well, what are the things that really drive me to travel? Of course, it's exploring new places, territories unknown, but also like flirting. Let's just say it.
Yeah, nothing wrong with some nice flirting.
That's very true. Let's take it back 2 summers ago. It feels honestly like 1 summer ago, but no, COVID took that one.
Yeah.
You and I met at a notorious party hostel in Lisbon called the GSpot.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say it. We're just going to get it out there. And one of my first questions for you, Jackson, it's a question I'm going to have to answer myself as well, is what the hell were you doing there?
Oh, okay, so I was only actually away for like 3 weeks on that trip, or a month. So we started off in another part of Portugal and then kind of traveled around Europe and then ended in Lisbon. And we started in this like really quiet hostel because we thought we didn't want to do the whole party thing. And then after 3 days there, we were like, nah, this is dead. We need to go to a party hostel. So then we kind of booked the rest of the trip based around party hostels. And to be honest, I think we should have balanced it a bit better because by the end it was exhausting. And especially in a hostel like the GSpot. I mean, look, I don't want to badmouth the GSpot. A lot of the time, the hostels is due to the people volunteering at the time. So like GSpot may be great now, I can't say. But that time when we were there, it was so bad. It was just terrible.
Totally. It was a sliding doors moment a bit because I was on my way in as you were exiting the GSpot, one kind of replacing the other. And I had just checked in, kind of dumped my bags. And I remember some first impressions about the place. We don't want to like badmouth it, like Jackson said.
Yeah.
But I remember checking in, dumping my bags. And over in the corner, you were kind of just hanging off of your bunk bed, right?
Yeah. It wasn't my bunk bed. That's how bad the hostel was. Someone was sleeping in my bunk bed. I was just on someone else's.
Oh my gosh, this sounds exactly like the problem that I came across like maybe an hour or two later. Do you remember this or were you gone by then? I got into an actual altercation over a locker. I remember I got assigned a locker. Someone was using mine. And, you know, as a hostel traveler would do, you're just like, whatever, I'll just use some other locker. Like the same way that you're like, I'll just use some other bed. Like life happens. Well, there was a grown-ass man whose locker I was using, and he was really pissed. And I was brushing my teeth, kind of minding my own business. Him and like two other full-grown adults came up to me with this really hostile, no pun intended, energy of just like, you're using my locker, you need to get out of there. And I was just absolutely shook. I mean, I even went down into the lobby and was like, hey, I don't feel really safe in my room right now. Like these guys kind of made me feel really uncomfortable. And again, this is why I kind of had that like negative vibe towards the place. Cause like, they were like, well, what do you want me to do about it?
It was definitely that kind of place. Like the people in charge just seemed like, as I said, I mean, different people seem to be in charge of those kind of places all the time. So maybe it was just that week or whatever. But I remember telling them like, yeah, there's someone asleep in my bed. And they were like, they just all looked like super hungover and like they'd had one too many big nights out. And they were just kind of like, yeah, I don't know, how about that one? And I was like, that's not made. There's like makeup stains on it. And they were just like, oh yeah, I know, it's just a bad situation. So I was just like left sleeping in like someone else's dirty bed. Also, then there's a chain reaction because then they probably came back and were like, what's this guy doing in my bed?
Wow. I can't say I'm surprised. And honestly, like, I think one of the big reasons why we hit it off is because I just was able to vent to you about like the situation and you were able to vent back. Yeah. And, you know, honestly, in these travel kind of situations where you're running across different people, there's this odd pressure in sorts of ways to always seem like you're having a great time or your weeks-long adventure backpacking around Europe is like going just so swimmingly. And sometimes you come across some hiccups and sometimes people are in your bed.
One time, the weirdest time, not on that trip, I was in a hostel and it had 3 levels of bunk and mine was right at the top on like the 3rd story. And I came back to bed really drunk one time and there was just some girl in there. And then she tried to tell me when I got up there, oh, why don't you find another one? I was like, this is my bed.
Oh my gosh. That reminds me, I remember that summer that I met you for my birthday, I had really in mind that I wanted to spend it in Budapest. And I wanted to be at a very specific hostel that I'd had a really great time at before. Basically recreate the magic. And honestly, that's kind of sometimes where you go wrong. Yeah. Like, if anything, go somewhere new. I still had a fantabulous time, obviously. But like, I remember one of those nights coming back super late to my 10 bed, 12 bed, whatever it was, dorm room and finding that my blanket was gone, like my cover. And I'm looking around and there's a couple in one of the other bunk beds who's clearly had a go of things, had a great time together. And they've got 2 blankets.
Cheeky.
And I just remember being so shook. I was just like, give me that back. Like, obviously soiled, just like your bed had been in Lisbon. And I remember, you know, this is also just goes to show like kind of the travel vibes, but I really wasn't even that pissed. Yeah, like, I feel like me at home right now, I was just kind of like, I would be upset. But over there, I was just kind of like, you know what? We'll talk about this in the morning. And then morning came and I was like, we're not going to talk about this. Like, whatever. Shit happened. But yeah. That's the case of the bunk beds, huh? That's how it goes. 12 in a room. You're going to hear some things.
Do you remember what hostel it was in Budapest? Because on that trip where I met you beforehand, we'd been at a party hostel in Budapest and it was so gross. Like, it was awful. I can't remember the name, but it was worse than GSpot. Like, it was... Oh. There were a few nights in a row where the same guy would just have really loud sex. And then on, like, the dot at, like, 4 every morning, the girl would be like, oh, I'm so sorry, guys. And it's just like, you could just not do it. Like, instead of like kind of sheepishly apologizing to everyone at 4 a.m. and waking them up, you could just be like, Yeah, maybe we don't do that this morning. But yeah, that was fun.
Wow. That sounds very Budapest, to be honest. It's like, it's part of the charm. You've got to have on your hostel backpacker bingo card someone having sex in your dorm room. For real. Yeah. Right next to someone like sounding like a chainsaw as they snore.
That was my friend.
No, you were a part of it. Oh my gosh. Well, I mean, I'll answer kind of for myself too, like what the hell I was doing at GSpot. I think as a traveler, just like you said, you know, you start off your trip with like, oh, I want to be in quaint places like you were. And then, you know, it's kind of quiet. And then you a little overcorrect.
Yeah, exactly.
I think that can happen. You overcorrect with like, okay, the crazier the hostel, the better. The bigger the innuendo in the name, the better. Hence the GSpot. Yeah. And, you know, at the same exact time, like I think I had just finished volunteering in a hostel in Lagos, Portugal, which is in the south. And that hostel was called the Rising Cock, which just, you know, you want to talk about names. I think it takes the cake. But, you know, the Rising Cock also had really, really recommended like, oh my God, you're going to Lisbon? You've got to go to GSpot. Yeah. And I think that's why what you said holds true. Hostels, they're fluid. It's not always one exact experience, or it's totally dependent on who's volunteering there, what the vibe is, even what travelers are coming in. Like, you know, what's their vibe? What do they want to do? Yeah. So yeah, that's the tale of the GSpot, really. And I remember when I was chatting with you, I was already in my head debating whether or not I was going to stick around. And that's the nice thing about hostels. If you're not feeling it, relatively, they're super cheap. Yeah. So you can really just leave. And that's what I did. I stayed for one night, did the pub crawl, had my ass grabbed by some random guy. And the next night I just packed my bags and I went to a different hostel, had a really lovely time there. Free sangria, happy hours.
Nice. That's what you want.
And it was ridiculously clean as well. Like I remember getting in my little twin bed at the second hostel and just feeling so cozy and was like, oh my gosh, this is what happens when you don't stay at a place that has an innuendo in the name. This is nice. Yeah. But getting back to that kind of moment that we met in Lisbon, I remember it was at the end of our little conversation. It was honestly, I'd say like less than 10 minutes, wouldn't you say?
Yeah.
It was short and sweet.
Yeah, because I mean, like that was not only the end of my trip in Lisbon, that was the end of my trip. So I was like quite tired and like just checked out, ready to go. I think I'd already had like my bags packed. I checked out and I was literally just waiting to get a bus or train to the airport.
Yeah, I remember we had our conversation. We were kind of doing that dance of like, well, am I going to get this dude's Instagram or what? Because that's how it works. When you're traveling, it's either you get the Insta or you get the WhatsApp. And I honestly am more of a fan of the Insta because you can slide in.
Yeah, you Americans don't like the WhatsApp, do you?
You know, I love it when I'm traveling though. Like it's certainly a vibe. But I will speak for myself and probably a majority of Americans that we're trying it on for size when we travel. We're like, ooh. And it has so many more bells and whistles to it too than like an average like iMessage. Yeah. But we still can't find ourselves like swapping over. I don't know what it is. But I remember we grabbed each other's Instas and like here and there we would keep up on the rest of my trip because I think, you know, I had a solid 3 more months left in me. And I was kind of hopping all over the place. Eventually got kicked out of the Schengen area and made my way east. And at the time, right before you and I met up again, I had just spent a week raving in Croatia. And I had some friends reach out saying that they were going to be in London to stop by. And honestly, what an American thing to do for all of us. Like, stop by Europe. It's right there, right? Yeah. But it was honestly perfectly timed. Like I was on the biggest come down of my life after this week-long extravaganza with Australians. And I was looking for something to do. I was really at a crossroads and was like, what the hell am I going to do with myself? I'm about to be a solo traveler for the first time in like a month because I've been lollygagging around Europe with these Aussies. And I was scared over that idea. You know, here I am, solo female traveler, but I was like, I don't know. I haven't done any research about Eastern Europe. And so when my friends invited me over, I was like, hell yeah, I'll be right there. Found a cheap Ryanair flight. And you and I actually met up for a night there. Yeah. You want to tell us about that?
Yeah, I think I remember just seeing on your Instagram or something, like I'm in London and I was like, yo, Cassy, let's meet up. And I distinctly remember like one of your friends getting on really well, talking about music and stuff. and another one, also a lovely guy, but we ended up having like what seemed like quite a long argument over what the difference between pickles and gherkins was. That was like quite a bit of what I remember about that night. And then I remember being at their Airbnb and, you know, things getting a little bit flirty between us. And then eventually you were like, oh yeah, I'm going to head off now. And I was like, okay, I'll come too. I didn't know whether to drop the whole, like, do you want to come back to mine or not? Because I then had to decide whether or not it would be a good idea to tell you, by the way, I do live with my family still.
That was the clinch right there. I recall we were hanging out. Yes, the pickle versus gherkin debate. At least it wasn't Fahrenheit versus Celsius. I'll tell you that. At least you guys had some originality with your American versus UK argument. But I remember just being so dead tired. If I hadn't been come down like Central, I think we would have definitely gone to a club or something or other. Yeah. But really, I was dying on their Airbnb futon. And then it was getting later and later. Brian and Becca are looking at me like, who's this dude? Where are you going with this dude? And I'm like, honestly, I'm dreaming about my bunk bed right now. And then the nail in the coffin was you putting me in that Uber and telling me that you live with your parents. I was like, okay, I'll see you later.
I should have just lied and been like, my landlord lives close by.
Wow. That would have been the absolute worst. Wow. Well, honestly, what a night it was. And really, like, we just sat around listening to rap music because my friend is a music producer and I know that you are really into music yourself. You've got a whole podcast about it.
Yeah, we do, the MMT podcast. But yeah, the fact that your friend knew who Jay Dilla was, I was just like instantly, boom. We were speaking for hours.
Yeah, truly. And I was passing out on that futon nearly for hours. But I was like, yeah, keep playing the music. But, you know, really like thinking about that night and other nights that are like it, they kind of get overlooked when you're traveling. Like these quieter nights of just like real connection, I think, and just kind of conversation.
Yeah, it was nice.
When we look back on travel, we tend to kind of overlook those and are always like, oh my gosh, remember that crazy night when we all jumped into the water after the club? But you got to recharge your batteries sometimes.
Yeah, no, I agree.
So I want to get into some questions for you.
Yeah, hit me.
When was it that you started traveling?
So like traveling, not until fairly recently. I guess a while ago now, but like probably like 2018.
Gotcha.
Before that, I'd been away by myself. Like me and Samet, the guy who I do the podcast with, we actually went away when we were like, we must have been about 18, just finished secondary school, like high school for you guys. And we went to Berlin for a week and he then actually moved to Berlin. So I went and saw him a lot in Berlin. But in terms of actually like traveling, like hopping from place to place, I went to Central and South America in 2018. And I just kind of instantly was like, yeah, this is the life for me. I love it.
Yeah, I can so imagine. That is definitely up next for me. I dipped my toe into Mexico and was like, yep, this is really where I see myself in this upcoming decade.
Yeah.
So on a previous episode, we had Melissa talk about how different trips bring forward different experiences or different lessons that you needed to learn. I'd love to hear the big takeaway that you've had from one of your trips.
Yeah, so I guess my first one, the Central America one I was talking about, was like my first time going somewhere like far away by myself. And I think the biggest lesson I learned was like a confidence thing. And like, you know, sometimes you walk into a hostel and there'll be people talking and you think, oh my God, they're best friends. I don't want to go and intrude. That's so weird. And you actually realize they all met like 2.5 minutes before you came and are like just getting to know each other. And it kind of like, it gives you the confidence to just insert yourself into conversations. Like for the most part, as long as you're not being a dick about it, people normally do want to chat, especially at hostels and stuff. So like having the confidence to just go up and say like, hey, I'm Jackson, nice to meet you, which is like a really non-British thing to do. Like it's like a really like a weird culturally thing to do. People are a little bit like, I don't know, quieter and a bit more.
Right, yeah. You guys do love your cues, though. Getting in line and not saying hi to strangers is the British way.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Like, for British people, saying hi to strangers is kind of weird. So it was a weird thing to get to that point. But then, like, I mean, you get over it in like a few days, you realize, actually, I'm just going to speak to everyone who interests me. And yeah, they're normally down for a chat as well.
I love that. And I definitely agree that that's something that I've unlearned as well during trips. And it takes a little bit of time. Like even when I start another solo trip, I'm sure in the future, that takes days. That takes kind of weeks to get back into that flow. And I talked about this with Melissa as well. But even in the beginning, say you're in Central South America or in a different country, you even kind of talk softer because you're like, oh, my accent, everyone's going to know no.
Yeah. I don't know if also like I've got a thing where like, let's say I'm hanging around with a bunch of German people for a day, guaranteed by the end of the day, I'm going to start saying weird stuff in a slightly German accent. Or like Americans, if I'm with Americans for the whole day, I'm definitely just going to start saying like weird American phrases that I've never said in my life. But
wow, it's lit. Yeah. I can imagine that. I remember someone stopping me and saying once, like, where are you from? Like, your accent is, I can't place it. And it was because I had been traveling around for so long and picking up, I was like a stray dog at that point.
Yeah. It's just like a load of weird accents all combined.
Yeah, totally. I want to get into your travel style. What's your vibe?
By yourself, you don't have to worry about like if one of you doesn't like the place you're going to go or the things you're going to do. So I think one of the other things that put a downer on the Budapest trip, we flew to Budapest from Portugal. And then on the plane, he was like, oh yeah, by the way, so I didn't book our hostel for this night. I booked it starting tomorrow, but I'm sure we can just go there and they'll let us sleep on the couch. And I was like, why are you sure? What on earth makes you think that is a thing that will happen? And then we got there and obviously they were like, yeah, no, obviously you can't stay here. So we just ended up calling around loads of hostels on Budapest on like a Thursday or Friday night, nothing available. And I just remember being so unbelievably pissed off with him. And he then paid for us to stay in a hotel that night, which was like half an hour drive outside of town because that was literally the only place available.
Bro, that is insane. I don't know if I could come back from that. Day one on the plane. Surprise, y'all.
Yeah, by the way. Yeah, I like being alone just because you've got that like control and the sort of, you do stuff as and when you want.
Right.
But I also quite like when you meet people and then do stuff with them, like that you've met, you both decide to go to a new city together or something. That's quite nice as well.
Oh, I agree. I think you make a really strong argument for solo travel.
What about you? Do you prefer traveling with friends or by yourself?
I like the idea of traveling with friends, very specific friends. I have one of my best travel friends. She just hit me up. Carla is an amazing person to travel with. Very much go with the flow and also brings me a little bit more out of my shell. She's the kind of person that will be hungover, but will still be doing a bunch of things. Whereas like my whole day's a wash. So I kind of need someone like Carla to force me to do stuff. Yeah. But I'll be honest, you know, whenever I book a trip with a friend, like a little bit of me misses that kind of openness you have to just being so free to do whatever in the moment. Yeah. You know, like you could meet someone and just like decide to go on some random adventure right there in that moment. Whereas with friends and whatnot, it's a little bit more planned. You're a little bit more stuck in your personality and that no one's pressuring you to be that person. It's kind of an internal thing. Like say if you're going with a group of friends and you're like the funny one. Yeah. Or you're the one that's a little bit always more responsible. Like you've kind of got that character to uphold. Yeah. Whereas if you're just a random person in Budapest, F it. Like change your name, you know?
Yeah, reinvent yourself.
Change your sign. You're no longer a Taurus. I'm an Aquarius. I am a Scorpio.
Yeah, although I should say actually, apart from the absolute mess up with my friend with booking the hostel, he was actually a pretty good person to go with because he was very similar in that he'd be hungover and still be like, so what are we doing today, guys? But he was also very go with the flow and chill. And he was like, oh, you want to go here? Yeah, sure, let's do it.
Nice. I mean, it has to take a go with the flow person to not have that first night booked.
Yeah, that's not a planner.
But honestly, like I feel like maybe by the end of your trip, you were like him too. Like I feel like in the beginnings of my trips, I'm very type A. Planning. There are Google Maps involved. There are timesheets. And then by the end, you really are in that zone of like, I mean, you know, whatever happens, man. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I want to hear about the kind of destinations that excite you.
Yeah, so I actually wanted to talk to you about this as well because I wanted to get the American perspective. For me, it's almost always beach, like big water, like a big lake or a beach or something. Mostly beaches because I surf. I love surfing. For me, when I went to Central America, South America, there was something so completely awe-inspiring and unbelievable culture shock that I couldn't have possibly imagined. Whereas when I went to Europe, don't get me wrong, it was great fun. But I didn't have the same culture shock. It wasn't the same. But then when I'd speak to Americans and Australians, they'd be like, oh my God, this is so amazing. This is so crazy. I'm wondering, is that just because, I guess for me, like I've been to Portugal as a kid on family holidays and I've been to like Spain. So maybe there's not that same mind fuck of like, I have no idea what's going on here. Whereas when I went to like Mexico or Guatemala, it was just so completely beyond anything I'd ever seen before.
Totally. I hear you there. And, and the American perspective, I remember when I first was kind of let out the house and doing my solo trips and whatnot, going to Europe, I was addicted, really. I don't know how many times, I think it was 2-3 times I went off by myself and kind of roamed about and was definitely having these big eye-opening moments of more so just wow, they do things at a different speed. This is really interesting. Yeah. And I think that that's a big part of the quote unquote mind fuck of it all, right? You're like, wow, things are really chill. Whereas in the US, it's this kind of go, go, go energy. And London can have it a bit too, for sure. Yeah. But as I get a little bit older, I'm more drawn to these kind of quaint towns. Give me cobblestones, baby. I like that. Let's take it down a notch. That's what I like. But speaking from my experience in Mexico, I absolutely loved as well, just sensory overload.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just such a different way of doing life, so much color and so many things that are a little bit more off the beaten path. And you feel that crazy amounts of hospitality of someone just being this is my home. I'm going to show you the goods that I sell by hand, whatnot. Those are the moments that stand out, really.
When I was in Guatemala, I met this girl and we kind of traveling around by this Lake Atitlan. And the girl was like, I've got a tent. We should try and find some forest or something to stay in. And we asked this local woman and she was like, it's probably not safe to stay in a forest, sleep in our land. It was just this local woman, her family and stuff that were making bread and stuff in the garden, little chickens running around, and they just let us pitch up a tent in their garden.
Wow, pitching up a tent in some local's garden with a girl.
Yeah,
nice.
It was crazy.
I love that. Now that is a real globetrotter story. Another question that I have for you. You said that you have a story time lined up for us that sounded really interesting. What was it? Quote unquote, you have the cheekiest travel story for us.
So I wrote down the cheekiest, worst, and funniest. So,
ooh, cheekiest. Yeah. Oh my gosh. Well, now I'm unprepared. I was just let him be cheeky. Let him go talk his talk.
No, I'll show you mine if you show me yours.
Nice. Okay, Jackson. Okay, I'll start with the worst. Oh my gosh. Mm-hmm. So I was in Vienna, and this was a couple trips ago when I was really into Tinder. To be honest, when I travel now, not right now, but when I travel in the past, I don't even use that anymore. It's just I much more prefer okay, just meeting someone, being bold enough to say hello and actually having that chemistry first. With Tinder, you have absolutely no idea if you're going to hit it off.
Yeah.
And case in point, I remember matching with some guy. He was Finnish, and I was this guy's really cute. I get to the bar and he's really adorable. I'm damn, okay, I lucked out. This is gonna be fun. Well, our date was so bad, you guys, that someone actually asked me when he went to the bathroom, paused and asked me and was are you okay? I don't know why this date went on for so long.
What was bad about it?
I remember that he played in sports, and so he was really fit, and I was damn, this guy is hot. Mm-hmm. And I'm a chatter, you know what I mean? On a first date especially. Yeah. And this guy was really kind of the strong silent type. And it went beyond. I think the way he would look at me when I talked, he hated me. There was a look of anger when he looked at me. Yeah. But it was so strange because he kept taking me around town. We started there, had I guess a beer, and was okay, I'll take you to the next place. And I truly the entire time was I don't know if you even like me. I'm not getting any good vibes here. But we met up in the day. I'd say maybe it was 5 or 4. And the date ended at night. It was 10 p.m. by the time we said goodbye. I was what are we doing if this is so bad? And why am I staying? Cassy, you can leave. But I remember we went to several different bars. And at the last bar, I remember I would say something and then he would just be absolute stone silence. I would say are you having fun? I remember just point blank asking him at one point and he was you Americans feel you always have to be talking.
He said that.
And I was wow, this is such a bad date. But I stayed. He was that hot, y'all. Willingly getting just so mistreated. But yeah, that was a date that had me reeling for days. I remember being kind of why didn't I stay? What was that all about? That's the worst. You go next.
All right, my worst. So my worst isn't really a globe-trotting story. It's just a bit gross. It was at that same hostel in Budapest where we didn't get in the first night because my friend didn't book it. And then this girl kept waking us up with her loud sex. And also I just wasn't feeling, like I was feeling a bit ill for that bit of the trip. And the hostel was like a proper big party hostel. And I remember at one point going to the toilet and this French guy was pissed on me.
What?
Like not voluntarily, not like a fetish thing. Just he was just pissing and then I was there and then he turned around and just pissed on me. So that wasn't great.
Nasty. You know, why is it that I have so many worse stories? Oddly enough, they're all kind of coming to mind. Another one was, I remember this was the first night that I was really proper volunteering in a hostel. And I was doing the overnight shift. And I should have known the night was going too well. You know, it was really easy. I was just watching Netflix. It was about to be 8 a.m., you know, like shift done. And then some really sweet girl comes to the desk and she's like, I'm so sorry to say this, but someone just puked in the room. And can you come help clean it? And I was just like, no. And there I go. And the puke is everywhere. That's the thing at these hostels, that they get you drunk and they're so excited and happy to, you know, like, and not everybody is a drinker, but you don't really ask yourself that before, like, making the kind of shy guy start chugging all these free shots. He may not be able to handle it. And this guy definitely wasn't able to handle it. It had gotten everywhere. Like, and he was still asleep when I got in the room. Like, he had vomited in his sleep. And so it was all over him. It had gotten on the floor. It had gotten on his sneakers. And you know, the thing is, with really, really gross things, like, for example, like your pee story, like that was really quick. So you're like very quickly like grossed out and you move on from it. You're like, ugh, and it stays gross to you. But when you're in a long gross situation, like you get kind of like immune to it. Like there I am like 7 minutes in swapping, I don't know if that's a word, but like really like swishing this puke all over the floor. And I'm numb to it at a certain point.
Yeah, it's just part of the night.
I could have started touching it with my bare hands at one point. Like I was just like, I am the puke at this point. Okay, now I have a cheeky one, but do you want to go first?
No, hit me with your cheeky one.
Cheeky. This is also such a like a British thing to say. Like I love the word cheeky just in general. It's just like naughty.
Terrible accent.
Those are tied for favorite British words, cheeky and naughty. But yeah, my cheeky story was in Barcelona. And I remember that I was seeing a guy and I should have been content with that. Like I already had my Barcelona kind of like love story for the week. Super cutie. But I wasn't content. Because on my last night...
One a week, not enough.
No, it was on my last night that I really wanted to have like one big last like banger in Barcelona. I'm sure you can relate. But he was in school and the next day he had some sort of test or something like that. I was like, okay, well, fine. I'll figure this out on my own. And I double booked my night. So me and him went to have dinner and then I was like, okay, great. There's this French guy that wants to go dancing. Sounds great. And I made the mistake of, as the night with date number one was going on and on and on, not in a bad way, in a great way. Yeah. He was like, well, what are you doing next? And I was like, well, I'm going to this bar. Told him the name of the bar. I'm meeting some people from the hostel there. And he's like, oh, awesome. I can take you there. It's honestly right around the corner. Cue me just starting to like shit myself right there. And eventually he ends up walking me to this bar. We turn the corner. I'm trying to come up with distractions left and right, let me tell you. Like, oh, let's stop in this corner store and like I want to buy some gum. And like I'm just trying to quickly think on my feet here. Nothing is coming. And eventually I just kind of have to like resign myself to the fact. Like I have made this bed. I must now lay in it, you know? We turn the corner and there he is. There's Frenchie like outside having a smoke outside of the mojito bar. And I'm like, holy shit. And the thing is with first Tinder dates, it's not like they're going to be like, hey, hug, oh my God. Like when I passed him, I was just like, hey, I'll see you in a second. And I was able to kind of play it off that he was just a dude from the hostel. And he's like, okay, I'll be out here smoking, like looking at me with this guy, like, I don't understand, but like, I guess this is not my business, you know? And so me and guy number one walk into the bar. And I'm having the realization that this is kind of the last time I'm going to see him. And we've had a great week together and like, yikes, you know? So this is the worst. We're standing by the bar and he's facing the opposite. So he can't see the doors. He can't see out the window. I can. And I still see Frenchie out there smoking. And I'm like, okay, well, this was really nice. Like, I loved hanging out together. Like, give him like a quick kiss. And he's like, okay, well, you have a good night. And I was like, you too. You have a nice life. And he leaves. Eventually, Frenchie guy comes in and we just kind of pretend it never happened.
Nice.
Yeah, messy. Is that cheeky or just terrible?
I don't know. Somewhere in between.
We love those kind of stories here.
Yeah.
Redemption arc, though. I mean, I didn't really actually hit it off with Frenchie. And I think I had that realization while on that date. I was just like, I think I want to go and hang out with guy number one again. So, yeah, that's cheeky for you.
So my funniest and cheekiest kind of are interlinked a little bit. So I met this girl, and you know how I was saying, like, in the Budapest hostel, it was so annoying that this girl would just, like, very noisily get it on with this guy. Like, in a different hostel, I was just that guy and that noisy dickhead. But anyway, like, very late, fell asleep, and I'd always keep my bag and my phone and everything in the locker when I slept. And we didn't get to bed until, like, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4, and I had to get a bus out of that town. There was only, like, 1 bus a day or 2 buses a day. And it came at like 6 or 6:30 in the morning. So I'd set my alarm, but obviously was so tired and hungover that I didn't hear it. So apparently it woke every single other person in the hostel up. And like, there was this German girl who was like fuming at me, like shaking the bed, like, what the fuck's wrong with you? You woke us all up, blah, blah, blah. And I was just kind of stumbling, like, I'm so sorry. And ended up stumbling out of the room, like packing all my shit together, quickly leaving because I had to catch this bus. And then when I got out, the bus was just going past. And I was like, oh shit, I need to get out. Like, I need to get out of this town. So I decided I was going to chase after the bus, like on foot. So I was carrying like my dirty laundry in one hand, my backpack on my back. And like, I was wearing flip-flops and I had to take them off and just ran down this like dirt road. And I was running and I kept thinking I was going to catch up. And then eventually I managed to like hitchhike a ride from a guy on a moped who was like, where are you going? I was just like, chase the bus. And I jumped on the back of the moped and chased it down. And I ended up getting the bus. But I just thought that whole sequence of 12 hours was possibly one of the weirdest and funniest things that happened to me.
Wow. I mean, honestly, like these trips are all about living long enough to see yourself become that person in the dorm. Like to become the villain. That's why you can't be that mad. Like when people honestly do that kind of shady stuff in the dorm, you're like, truly, it's just not my night, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think sometimes that's what it is. It's just you're hating a little bit like, ugh.
Honestly, that is the big life lesson in a nutshell as well, is like, what is it that's annoying you right now? And what is it about you that hates that, you know? Yeah, that's a big unlearning for me too. Like I was talking about this with Melissa on the other episode about like, you know, in the beginning of your trips, we came across a lot of Aussies that were doing like crazy stuff. Like Aussies in a nutshell, like they can be that test for you, you know? Like there they are in the corner, like drinking alcohol out of their Birkenstock. And you're like, oh my God, that's so gross. Fast forward a couple of weeks later in Lagos, Portugal, and you're thinking about it. Am I about to do this shoey? Live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Did you do a shoey, Cassie? Did you ever go there?
I've absolutely never done a shoey, I'm proud to say. But I did lose my annoyance for people that did do shoeys. You know, I was a little bit more tolerant.
Fair enough.
Have you ever done a shoey?
No, absolutely disgusting.
What a British answer. Never.
Your English accent needs a lot of work.
I'll get back to watching my BBC and I'll be ready next time. I want to get the dude perspective on this. Mm-hmm. Has a travel fling for you ever turned into something serious? Have you ever been tempted?
I guess it depends what you mean by serious. But like I met this really great girl in Prague. We kept speaking for ages after we met. And like we really, really hit it off when we met. And then she ended up coming to London. She was like traveling around Europe and then she was going to travel around South America. So like on a stop between, she was in London for like a week. So she stayed with me for a long weekend, like probably almost a week to be fair. And yeah, we really hit it off. I liked her a lot. But like, I mean, not serious in the sense that I ever wanted to start anything long distance. Because me personally, I don't think that's really a thing that works. But like, no, I definitely liked her. And it was the kind of thing where like, you know, sometimes it doesn't have to be forever. There can be the thing in between a fling and like long term. Like you can really enjoy someone's company a lot and really like them, but also know that it's only going to be for a week or so.
Honestly, you're preaching to the choir. So you don't have to sell me on this. Truly, it's really in my top 3 things in life is meeting up a love interest in a different country, preferably at a really cute Airbnb.
Not at their mum's house.
No, oh my God, please no. So, okay, God willing, post-COVID worlds, where is up next for you?
So I'm kind of torn at the moment between wanting to go to Asia or wanting to go back to Latin America. I just want to surf. I don't really care where I do it. It could be Indonesia, it could be Vietnam, it could be Australia. Like if I did Asia, it would probably be all of like Australia,
wow,
Southeast Asia and Vietnam and stuff. But I don't know. I'm completely in love with Latin culture and food, and I just loved it so much when I was there. And I wasn't there for that long, and I want to go back for like really long, like a year or a year and a half.
Oh, totally. Yeah. You know, when I love to travel too, it's like these longer extended periods of time. And obviously you have the hostels that you can volunteer in and make that like budget friendly, but there's also like workaways too.
Yeah.
I could picture you teaching surfing at a workaway in Costa Rica or something.
That is the dream.
I'd love to hear as well how your experiences will be different when you travel out this next time. Like, what are you looking forward to? Do you feel like you'll be a little bit internally changed?
Yeah, I also think it'll probably be a lot less alcohol fueled. Like I could imagine like wanting to take a slightly quieter, less drunk trip.
Yeah, totally. I'm with you. And I think my body is very with you. It's just in general. Like, I know I'm kind of almost dreading my first hangover. Like, I'm not drinking in isolation. Like, what's the point? I'm kind of a social drinker to begin with. I honestly see it as like, there's no calories. There's no need to drink if there's no cuties around. Absolutely not. I'll be taking the water.
No, I like a nice drink sometimes. But definitely, I think the next trip will be a lot less alcohol fueled.
I think that you say this now, and then you're going to get to that quaint little hostel, just like you did with your friends. And you're going to be like, overcorrection. I think I'll see you back at GSpot.
Yeah, just be like 2 bottles of wine every night.
Nice, yeah. And well, I'm with you, though, that I think this next few trips, once we're kind of free out of the gates, they're going to be so different. And I think, too, like, probably for you as well, like one of my favorite things when traveling is swapping stories and experiences with people. And I think people are going to have some really crazy freaking stories. To not come out of this year with some depth, with some dimension.
Yeah.
You didn't do 2020 right.
I wonder as well if like we're saying we want like a more quaint trip, if it's just going to be absolute chaos. Like I've been thinking about this, not just for traveling, but nights out as well. I think they're going to be disgusting because as soon as people are allowed to go out again, they are going to be wild animals.
Mayhem.
I'm excited for it though.
Yes.
I miss queuing up at a bar. One of the funnest things about going out for a drink, obviously you have fun talking to your friends, but it's also fun just chatting absolute shit with a stranger at the bar.
Well, I want that perspective. I want that way of holding the world. What an opportunity it is to be waiting this long to get my drink. I could really be chatting it up with people. Again, the British love for queuing has come up. You guys love a good line. I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for coming on here. Truly, I mean it when I say come back. What amazing stories.
Yeah, for sure. I've got far more stories to go, and I'm sure you do as well. I'll get all of those juicy stories out of you next time.
Need more of Jackson's accent? I get it. His SoundCloud-based pod, MMT Podcast, has you covered, along with all the news you need on movies, music, and technology. Like what you just heard? Be sure to subscribe to the pod to get more Globetrotter delivered straight to you. And don't forget to follow Globetrotter on Twitch to catch these interviews recorded live, along with all the bits that were too risque to make the final episode. Inspired to share your epic travel story? DM the Lover in Travel Lover on Instagram to tell me all about it. Till next time, I'm Cassy Martinez.